welcome to The Theory. I am your host, the political theorist, and today we're going to be talking about doing your own research in order to seek the truth. And the reason I'm doing this is because over the last several years, we've noticed the mainstream media working in tandem with one particular political party, and unless you're still asleep, I'll put it like that. You haven't noticed it, but um, they are basically cheerleading and basically spouting only um, one side or telling you one side of the argument while demonizing the other side. And millions of people fell into this. Now, over the last few years, a lot of people have been waking up to the truth after seeing multiple times when the mainstream media has just flat out lied to us. It's not just it's not just broadcasting propaganda where they're straight out lying to you. Um, I'm not even going to say mistruths because, well, yeah, I'll go with that mistruth, and also telling you mistruths. Um, Trying to tell you something as factual based when it's absolutely not. One instance is the Russian collusion hoax. I'm sorry, but folks, however you feel about this, there is no way in the world that the federal government is going to launch a multi-year investigation into a person or a group or an activity or whatever, spend tens of millions of dollars, and then come up empty-handed with only people getting arrested for process crimes. It just doesn't happen. Um, Also, um, I've actually read the transcripts for the Ukraine call. I've read the Mueller report, and I've read a few other, a lot of other documents coming out, and I've also been following the impeachment, and I'm going to call that a scandal in itself. Um, and there's a lot of, I'll put it like this: the impeachment of Donald Trump is actually causing a constitutional crisis. So that's what we're seeing right now, and that's what we're living through. Um, Now I can tell you what I see in the for the future, but I'd rather not. But I will tell you what's happened to me over the last couple of weeks. Right before Christmas, I had some liberal lunatic actually get on the Black Prepper Society um, in response to a video that I posted about the situation developing in Virginia from a YouTuber who was reporting on it. And he basically just came out and said, you need to start using uh, more authoritative or reliable sources. I'm like, are you talking about like the reliable sources that, and I basically went over my thing with the mainstream media, where they lied to us about the polls. They lied to us about what the election was, the results of the 2016 election were going to be, where they pushed nothing but Russian collusion conspiracy theory, um, where everything came out that they were pushing ended up being a big nothing burger. And so this lunatic, after I banned and blocked him at some point, after I was like, you know what, why am I arguing with this idiot? So I banned and blocked him off the page. Um, and because he was actually just doing that, he was spreading conspiracy theory and propaganda. And I have no time for that on my page. That's not what it's there for. And so he actually went under a different profile, which completely blew his OPSEC all the way open. Um, and I found out everything I need to know about that guy, including what kind of firepower he's working with. And I'll say I'm not impressed. Uh, he actually went under a different profile and tried to smear me on one of the groups that my page happens to be a member of. I mean, he actually literally went in there, joined the page that morning after I banned him, and went ahead and went on a little smear campaign. And of course, I've noticed that a lot of people in our community absolutely do no research. They do no background checking of their own whatsoever to see if somebody's telling the truth or not. The guy was trying to smear me, trying to say I was a white guy or a group of white people posing as a black preparedness page or black people running a preparedness page. I mean, you don't get more liberal. I only, yeah, I'll say liberal lunatic because he was being a far left activist, and didn't know what he was talking about, had no facts in his assumptions whatsoever. Anyways, so um, I left it alone at some point, um, but I noticed that a lot of um, black folks on that page were actually sitting there co-signing, and I'm like, how can you just take this guy's word for it? And I mean, he's sitting there asking me a bunch of stuff that right to he has no right to know that kind of information about me. He's sitting there asking where I'm from, what my name is, what I look like. I'm not giving him that information because I don't know this guy. So I'm sitting there like, why are you idiots co-signing for this? But I digress. So Christmas Day, I ended up giving my poor grandfather, who happens to be a lifelong Democrat. I don't know how him and my grandmother stayed married for as long as they were, because I know she was a Republican. But I gave that poor man a coronary because almost gave him a coronary, and I hate to say one of my kids almost helped with that, but he straight believes that Donald Trump cheated in 2016, even though there is documented evidence that shows that Hillary Clinton actually stole the election from Bernie Sanders, the primary from Bernie Sanders, and tried to cheat to win the general. And that's documented facts. Um, and he didn't want to believe that. In fact, he didn't even want to believe that she rigged the election, the primaries, to beat Bernie Sanders. And so at some point I was like, you know what? I don't want to be responsible for him having a heart attack, so we'll change the subject. But Christmas Eve, um, I went to my sister's, first time we all got together in a very long time. And, it was a good family get together. Well, my brother, who's the crap starter that he is, decided that he was going to um, basically tell a guy that I guess is dating or whatever with my former stepmom. Um, he told this guy who I guess is politically inclined or whatever. Well, this guy, it turns out, and I had a chance to observe him, and that's another thing. You want to observe any possible opponents, especially new people that you meet. Well, my brother went over there running his mouth and saying, that you know basically telling him my political views. And so this guy waited. He didn't confront me right then and there. He waited several hours until I was good and half asleep, which is about the worst time you can debate with anybody. He waited until I was at a weak point, and then he came after me. And so, for some reason, I woke up right then and there and hit back. Um, now on now he did mention something about you know him not liking the president. That's his choice. But if you're going to say something to me, um, be prepared for me to go back and do some research if I don't know anything about what you're talking about. If I don't do it right then and there, trust me, I will do exactly what I did here. I went I went home, I looked it up, And it took a minute, but after going through, he was telling me that um, something about sailors from the USS Nimitz had gotten off in New York and were trying to sell things from Trump Tower, and Trump kicked them out of Trump, kicked them out of Trump Tower, blah 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 blah. I, I'm sitting there thinking, I may not have been in the military, but I do know a few things about um, what sailors can do while they're on shore leave, and that doesn't sound right, So I went to double check all this, and I did find what I was looking for. It took a minute because I had to go through as many left leaning publications that I knew were publications, were far left leaning publications that were going to leave out certain truths and a make certain parties look bad and not show any exculpatory evidence. So I'm not. Um, Before anybody says anything, I'm not going to go into the whole impeachment thing. There's a lot there, but I will tell you this: it is a sham. However, it's a scandal. It's a scandal itself. And if you compare this impeachment to the last impeachment of Bill Clinton, you will see some incredible differences, mainly speed, time, and no one gets in trouble on hearsay evidence. And in fact, hearsay isn't even evidence, but no one ever gets convicted of a crime based on hearsay. Just saying. Um, and so I went back and I looked this information up um, regarding this whole um, you know kicking veterans out of Trump Tower for selling merchandise, and I did find a fact check um, article about this, and so I'm gonna go ahead and put this up here, and then we're gonna go over it and see what the truth is. Okay, this is from factcheck.org, and basically it is called Trump versus Veteran Vendors. It's from 2016. It actually is the one that deals with this particular article, and we'll go and read this one. Um, an ad from a pro Marco Rubio super PAC claims Donald Trump bans disabled veterans from his high rise, but the ad may have a misleading impression. Trump has not banned veterans from Trump Tower in New York City, but rather he lobbied local politicians to ban street vendors. So this is a general ban on street vendors, including those with special disabled veterans licenses from operating on Fifth Avenue where Trump Tower is located. The ad from Conservative Solutions PAC is running in Florida, which is Rubio's home state, but where he trails Trump in the polls. The real Clear Politics average of polls showed Trump leading Rubio by nearly 20 percentage points as of February 26th, the day the ad debuted. The Florida primary will be held on March 15th and is shaping up as a key battle in the Republican race. Okay, so automatically we already know this is politically motivated as a tactic. It's not a new tactic, it's actually a pretty old one. And it's basically it's what's called a kludge in basically the real world. It's basically where you tell the truth, but you leave out certain parts of it. It's the best way to tell a lie. Best way to tell a lie is to tell the truth, except leave out certain parts of it. And in this case, this is a politically motivated attack, and somebody took that as pure gospel. And let's continue to read on. The ad begins with Trump declaring, quote, "I love the poorly educated," end quote. A line that even the most casual political observer could have predicted would end up in an attack ad. And that's absolutely true. I would have done it myself. The narrator goes on to say that Trump, quote unquote, quote, bans disabled veterans from his high rise, end quote. The ad shows a picture of Trump Tower with a tear sheet from the Daily Beast with the headline, Donald Trump wanted vets kicked off Fifth Avenue. Viewers may be left with the impression that Trump has banned disabled veterans from his building, or perhaps that it was built in a way that makes the building inhospitable to them. That's not what happened. Updated March 8, 2016. The ad has since been amended, and the narrator now says he, Trump, bans veterans from in front of his high rise. Emphasis is ours. Rather, though it doesn't say so, the ad is referring to Trump's involvement in decades long tension between street vendors and the operators of Tony businesses along New York's Fifth Avenue. Apparently, this is a problem that's been going on for a while. At issue is a statute that dates back to 1894, providing peddling exceptions for disabled veterans of the Civil War. According to the New York Times, it provided for unrestricted peddling privileges for disabled veterans on any commercial street or in any park anywhere in the state. But in the early 1990s, store owners began to complain that a growing number of vendors were clogging the sidewalks in front of their businesses, sometimes selling knockoffs of the very items sold in their stores, and generally, as the Times put it at the time, detracting from the allure and cachet of one of the most famous shopping streets in the world. Okay, now in the late 1990s, I actually did go to New York on a high school trip, and we actually had a group of street vendors literally follow us all over the city. They followed us from where the ferries pick you up to go over to Liberty Island, Ellis Island. They followed us to Broadway, Times Square, and there were just street vendors everywhere. So basically, I can understand this from a business owner's perspective. They were complaining because these people were basically affecting their businesses. So, I mean, they couldn't exactly compete with cheap knockoffs, and it made their products look bad. And it also made getting through those narrow streets or narrow sidewalks pretty impassable. And no business owner would want anything or anyone to adversely or negatively affect their business. All right, the article continues on. One of the owners complaining about vendors was Trump. Trump finished construction of the 68-story Trump Tower, a retail and luxury condominium building, in 1984. The Daily News reported that several years later, in 1991, Trump wrote a letter to John Deere, then chairman of the State Assembly Committee on Cities, advocating that the city ban on vendors on Fifth Avenue, including veterans. While disabled veterans should be given every opportunity to earn a living, is it fair to do so to the detriment of the city as a whole or its tax-paying citizens and businesses? Trump wrote in the letter. Do we allow Fifth Avenue, one of the world's finest and most luxurious shopping districts, to be turned into an outdoor flea market, clogging and seriously downgrading the area? The dispute was settled with a deal that restricted the number of veteran vendors allowed in Midtown Manhattan and prohibited vendors on some of the most high traffic streets, including Fifth Avenue. In exchange, the Fifth Avenue Association contributed $400,000 to veterans programs and agreed to offer jobs to local veterans holding a peddler's license at that time. The issue arose again in 2004 when the regulations came up for renewal, and Trump continued his appeal, this time to then Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Whether they are veterans or not, the vendors should not be allowed to sell on this most important and prestigious shopping street, Trump wrote to Bloomberg, the Daily Beast reported. The image of New York City will suffer. I hope you can stop this very deplorable situation before it's too late. Now, you can clearly see he's not talking about his building. He's talking about the street and the city as a whole, and how it affects the look and how it will affect them their businesses in a negative way and the way people look at New York. I mean, anyone who has actually been paying attention to the homeless crisis out in California, in cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and even Seattle and Washington, where people are shooting up in the streets, shooting illegal drugs up in the streets, leaving needles all over the place, defecating in the streets. There's actually an article recently where someone actually defecated in a store. So I can totally understand where Trump is coming from on this, and he's looking at, as a business owner, not just looking out for his businesses, but businesses in the area as well. And so anybody who doesn't see that is choosing not to see it. The piece continues. The Daily Beast notes that peddlers were largely banned from Fifth Avenue, but they continued to sell their wares on the side streets. The story includes a photo of a row of planters installed in front of Trump Tower to discourage vendors from setting up shop outside his building, which is perfectly his right. Some may take issue with Trump's opposition to street vendors, including disabled veterans, on Fifth Avenue. In fact, the New York Times published an opinion piece by sociologist Michael Dunyer on January 4, 2004, arguing to let New York's veterans vend. Michael Dunyer, July 4, 2004. No one is arguing to protect the scores of unlicensed vendors who sell counterfeit goods, but cracking down on them should not come at the cost of stripping away the long-standing right of disabled veterans to make a living. We take no position on that, of course, but the ad summarizes the entire issue by saying Trump bans disabled veterans from his high-rise, leaving out crucial details and presenting an incomplete and misleading account of what this issue is all about. So there you have it. This is a case where someone decided to try and debate me at a clear moment of physical weakness for me, because I was tired when the whole debate even started. So I got to read this guy very well and figure him out. Again, this was the first time I ever met the guy, but I got a very good idea of what kind of person he is, not just from that little interaction, but the whole night in general. I also want this to be a lesson. If you're going to tell somebody something and expect them to believe it like it's gospel, like apparently you might have, or somebody you know might have, make sure that person's not going to go back and research and prove you wrong, because you don't want to have egg on your face. A friend of mine on Facebook recently challenged me to a meme that I put up about Maxine Waters advocating violence against Trump and people in his administration, and he wanted me to prove it. And I brought my facts and evidence through articles and video of her saying that, saying these things over the years, and he was actually shocked. So that my lesson at this point is, if you're going to spout off any kind of talking point that you've heard, at least research it first to make sure it's true. Because if there's any evidence that can actually, let's say, exculpatory evidence, somebody's going to bring it to your attention and be like, look, this is what it says. Now, if you choose not to believe it or not to research it yourself, then that is on you. Thank you once again for tuning in to the theory here on The Survivor's Edge. And you guys have a great and wonderful holiday season, and we'll catch you guys later. Yeah.